Welcome to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins, and we're live in Columbus with the American Farm Bureau Federation. They chose Columbus this year for their target training, welcoming in 100 or so members of American Farm Bureau from all across the country to learn about how to network, how to work with the media, how to build their brand, and really focus on advocating for agriculture all across the country. Before we get started, I'll have everybody wave to you. There you go. Representatives from all over the country joining Trevor and I. And Trevor Kirkpatrick, a lot of you within Ohio Farm Bureau's ranks know who this is. He is an organization director for Carroll, Harrison, Jefferson, Tuscarawas counties, and also hosts the Stock Talk podcast. And Trevor, we'll talk about the podcast and why you decided to start one in just a bit. But I want to learn about you more now. So tell me about yourself, your family, and how you fit into this world of Ohio agriculture.
Yeah, Ty, well, first of all, thanks for having me again. I love the podcast. I'm an active listener, and so if you're not, I hope you become a listener of the podcast. Appreciate you having me back. But I am a passionate advocate for agriculture, and I was since I was a kid, and I started my passion through showing pigs. I was a 4-H'er, and if you talk to a lot of people, that seems to be the start, is 4-H and FFA. Well, that passion grew as I was fortunate to have success through my showing career. And I wanted to make sure that was a career for long term, to be a job outside of my my collegiate career. And so we now raise show pigs, my wife Emily and son Owen, who just turned 1 year old, building the brand for him. And so we raise a small herd of show pigs there in East Central Ohio.
You had to mention Owen, and I'm glad you did, because I'm sure that changed the perspective and the dynamic and the direction of your operation. How so?
Very much so. We're in a world now where it's so fast-paced, and you really don't understand it until you have children. Even if you don't have children, I hope you can kind of resonate with it. Before, I was growing the brand for myself and my wife and my family name, right? I wanted to make sure that my farm was impressive, if not for me, my family. And now that I have a little 1-year-old looking up at me, everything that I do in the operation, whether it be bookkeeping or cleaning pens daily, every day I'm thinking, will Owen appreciate what I'm doing now for the future? And am I building the brand that he can be proud of? And every single day, no matter what that I do, that's always in the back of my head. Not to mention, I've got a very, very loyal customer base, and I'm blessed to have that. And when you're doing something that you're proud of and you want to make your family proud of, they see that. And they want to be a part of that. And that is an organic growth that I've seen, very, very fortunately, because they want to be a part of something that has grown over time. And so I'm proud to say that, but it's not done, right? I'm always looking at ways to improve. And having a young little 2 eyeballs looking up at you every single day, it really makes you step back and think, how can I improve what I'm already doing? And is he going to be one to take it to the next level the next time?
The average age of the farmer in Ohio is about 58 years old. Trevor's a long way from that. New and beginning farmers, though, are growing in Ohio agriculture. The latest census told us that we have over 5,000 new and beginning farmers between 2017 and 2022. Being in that category and being a first-generation farmer, what are some of the challenges you're facing?
It is a challenge, and I really didn't know what kind of a challenge it was until I took the position as organization director at Ohio Farm Bureau, mainly because I was just exposed more to the whole spectrum of farmers, right? You've got your ones in college or high school that think they know it all, right? That they're getting started, but we need them. And then you have the ones that are maybe getting ready to transition out. Maybe they're almost done. And as a young producer, the hardest thing was to set the ego aside and just learn. Shut your mouth and listen. And I'll say that personally. It's not for everybody, but for me, I like to talk. I like to talk to people. I'm outgoing. I thought I knew it all. It was really hard several years for me to just pause and listen and be a sponge and absorb it all. And I think if I were to give one piece of advice for my generation, is that we need the older generation just as much as they need us. And I think if we can look back across the spectrum at each other, we're going to go a long ways, because we're bringing new ideas, new technologies, new excitement to the industry, but we have to learn where we came from, and that is respect to our ones that we've looked at for years and years in that 58 plus range.
There are no easy aspects of agriculture. No matter what you're in, row crops, livestock, what have you, horticulture, there are challenges that just seem to keep piling on. Your industry there in the show pig world is getting more and more competitive every year. How do you stay ahead of the curve and continue to learn and continue to be competitive in the show ring?
Boy, it is, and that's the industry I grew up in, and so it became so competitive. I don't know if anybody knows what a jackpot show is, right? That's a weekend pop-up show where you go, you have fun, and come back. It's different from a county fair or a state fair. When I started, there was 2, and nobody knew what a jackpot meant. Now there is a show every single weekend across the country, no matter where you go. And so it's taking us a long time, and we've got a lot of work to do with Kirkpatrick Livestock in that. How do we stay in front of it? When we started the brand, before we even launched into where we are now, I did a market evaluation, and actually did it with the podcast too. We'll talk about later. What can I do differently that everybody else is doing, but how can I do my own twist? There are so many show pig producers that have 5 or less sows. I only have a handful myself. You've got people that have hundreds. How can I set myself apart differently than everybody else? I always look to, well, who's going to buy them? You know, we've got to make money here, and that grows organically. Like I said, with the reason I'm doing this is because if you're passionate about it and if you're growing it, and you take care of the people who are buying from you, it'll grow organically. So I've done that a long time. Before my career in Farm Bureau, I raised show pigs for somebody else. I was a farm manager at a show pig operation not too far from here, and I was passionate. I treated everything as my own. How would I want this farm to operate? What was interesting was every pig that I sold, I kept contact over the years. And as I grew my own operation, they kept in contact. And so they were really excited that I was doing my own thing now, because you did it back then with somebody else's, but here's your own twist. And so I was really interested in growing a customer base before I grew the brand. And I think sometimes we're so excited to get that new shiny new logo out there, we're not prepared for what might be sustainable long term. So we worked really hard, my wife and I, to network. Hey, we're getting ready to start this thing. It's going to be exciting. Well, yeah, but everybody's doing it. Yeah, but it's Kirkpatrick Livestock. It's going to be different. And they laughed at us, but we're doing showman meetups, right? It's an open house. Come and join us. We're going to show you A to Z how all the things that we wish we knew. And so that makes us a little different. We take care of our customers top to bottom because it is such a competitive industry that we're out to win. We want to win. And so if we can teach that, whether you're a beginning first-time showman or you've been doing this and you're getting ready to graduate, we need you all. And we have a program that we've used that works.
Again, in Columbus with the American Farm Bureau Federation for this Ohio Farm Bureau podcast, their target training right here in the capital city, working with people from all over the country to find out how to engage with consumers and the media and talk about what they do best on the farm wherever they might be across the country. You have a lot of those conversations, not because of just your business there in agriculture, but also because of your job, being the organization director for Ohio Farm Bureau in 4 counties in southeast Ohio. You have a chance to interact with consumers and the media. I put you in front of some media every once in a while myself. How do those conversations go, and why is talking with the general public so important for us in Ohio agriculture?
Boy, it is so important because I'm big on optics, and what I mean by that is, what does it look like? You know, we want to make sure agriculture looks good, right? But sometimes maybe the wrong person talks to the wrong person and they're unknowledgeable about what's going on. And it's always important to make sure that we are understanding of both sides. And so in some of those conversations, when I am challenged about what are you doing? What is agriculture? You know, cows are farting too much, right? And all these things we're hearing. And so you got to be patient. Although you want to laugh in their face, you can't and you won't. Because as soon as you do that, then they become on the defense and the conversation kind of goes nowhere. And so you kind of got to be a listener and then understand their point of view and maybe even say that, hey, I understand where you're coming from, but do you have a minute where I can tell you maybe some of the facts that I've learned in my position? And once they know that it's a conversation and not an argument, I think a lot of knowledge is pulled from that. And what I mean by that is you can tell them the very, very high-end basics of what agriculture really is, the sustainability that we're doing, the conservation projects that are in place. We're not out there to destroy the world. We're actually stewards of it. And so when that conversation happens, they become comfortable. But do not forget that you have to learn from them also. You have to listen. You do not have to agree. Learning does not mean you have to agree. But as soon as you find somebody that might be a little abrasive to what you're doing, you have to learn where they're coming from, and the conversation happens, and it's not an argument. It took a long time for me to understand because I kind of protect agriculture. I'm the daddy bear of agriculture, and I don't want them to, mess it up. But that's not the way to look at it. I'm a protector of it, but now I know the conversation instead of an argument.
We have so much work to do as far as promotion and education of agriculture, and we found out the hard way yesterday with a couple of facts that we learned from our friends at Oklahoma State University in a presentation. And in one of the sessions yesterday, I found out for the first time that 40% of people didn't know potato chips come from potatoes. You can't make this stuff up. And you know that 10% of the population thinks chocolate milk comes from brown cows. That tells us how much work we have to do. But along with what they don't know, there are some things that they're learning from other people outside of agriculture that aren't true about agriculture at all. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you get asked about when you work with the general public?
Yeah, and it's a gambit, right? One of the best things we have in agriculture are the fairs, the festivals, because that's a very public eye. Here in Ohio, we are adamant that the Ohio State Fair needs to be downtown Columbus. And there's a reason for that. We want those who are interested in it, even if it is just to go ride the rides, but you know what? Let's go to the hog barn. Let's go pet pigs, right? There's a lot of questions. Why are they in a pen? What's those notches in their ear? Did somebody take a bite out of it? Why are their tails so short? I thought they were curly. There's red pigs. I thought they were all pink. And welcome all of that, right? You wanna include those conversations because when they go back and talk to the next person, you're like, I talked to this person at the Ohio State Fair, wherever you're from, and they let me pet their pig. And did you know that those notches in their ears are actually identification? And did you know that there's lots of colors of pigs? They become excited. And at the end of the day, I always try to do this, depending on how the conversation goes. We're doing this to fill a dinner plate. At the end of the day, we're feeding the world. And we cannot do it without everybody's help, right? And so it becomes, again, that first line of like, why are you doing this? You're whipping them, right? When you drive pigs in the show ring, you're hurting them. Not at all. They're trained to do this, and actually that's their preferred method of, it's the only animal we can't lead around on a rope, right? So it looks very, very different. But as soon as you understand where they're coming from and tell them, actually, let me get this pig out real quick so we can show you how it works. That pig's trained to a T. Doesn't even need a rope to walk around. Then they become a lot more receptive of it.
One of the things we're going to be talking about later this hour is about how to start a podcast. Being on a podcast and being in front of a TV camera and on the radio is one thing, but there are a lot of people out there that might want to think about starting their own podcast, and it is easy as it's ever been right now. And we're going to be showing our audience here. I'll show them again here in Columbus Bureau Federation all across the country. There they are, learning about how to do what we are doing right now with the podcast. They're with the American and their promotion and education segment of the organization here to learn about working with the media and working with messages for the general public. We'll continue our conversation with Trevor Kirkpatrick coming up after this on the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast to learn about his Stock Talk podcast.
Sometimes out here, you have to speak loudly.
Our voice alone may not have as much impact as we would like, but my voice
can be heard and influential through membership in Ohio Farm Bureau.
My voice, along with tens of thousands of Ohioans,
makes a difference when it comes to legislation, regulation, or litigation that can be positive or potentially harmful to those of us in the agriculture community.
Become a member today at ohiofarmbureau.org.
Because there is strength and members.
Find out how Nationwide Agribusiness can help you grow your business. Get to know the people with the experience and knowledge to help you. Whether you are looking to protect your farm or ranch from the ground up, or need someone who understands your changing commercial ag needs. Find out how to better manage the risks of your ag business, or how quickly you can get back to business. Learn how you can protect your next with Nationwide on your side.
Welcome back to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. We're in Columbus at the American Farm Bureau Federation's Promotion and Education Conference. Their target training is in the capital city. as they rotate around all across the country for this event every other year, and we're happy to have him here. Trevor Kirkpatrick joins me on the podcast. He is an organization director with Ohio Farm Bureau covering Carroll, Harrison, Jefferson, and Tuscarawas counties. He is also the host of a podcast. What we're doing with our members of the audience here today is showing them how to prepare for the media and be on a podcast or be on a radio program, but also because it's become more easily available to start your own podcast. There are some real opportunities there, not just to share your message and build your brand, but also maybe to monetize, bring in a new revenue stream to your operation, and to find your fit in exactly how a podcast that you might produce might look. We have equipment here that Trevor and I use that we're going to show them after the podcast and show them how easy it is to get started. Tell me about your podcast. Stock Talk is something you started a few years ago and it's built pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was amazing, and it started because all I did was look for something that I wanted, and it wasn't there, so I built it. My co-host and I, Corey Edge, he actually is a really, really good friend of mine in Indiana, and I was cleaning pens one day as I mentioned, and I guess before I get any further, I wanted to thank American Farm Bureau for having me, because this is one of my passions. And so now they're merging. So a huge shout out to them and you for having me back on this. But Stock Talk started because I wanted something that I could listen to every single day and learn from. And obviously the show livestock industry is a passion of mine. And I went through every single platform and couldn't find anything. There were some about, certified Angus beef and all these programs, which is excellent. But there wasn't really anything show stock related. And so a couple phone calls, a couple text messages with Corey, my good friend, I've left him a voicemail, and I said, man, I think we've got something here if you're wanting to come in with me. If not, I'll try to figure it out myself. We played phone tag. He left me a voicemail, and he says, man, I've got 2 words for you, Stock Talk. And he hung up the phone. I got goosebumps, and we were ready to rock and roll, right? So Stock Talk has become a brand that people recognize in the show stock world. We cover hog, sheep, cattle, and goats. And we have a weekly guest and covering all different topics. And so this segment, I guess, is going to kind of cover what I wish I would have known and why we did it.
So why did you decide to start a podcast? What were some of the metrics out there that you were looking at that you decided it was going to be worth the while?
Yeah, absolutely. So I put on the screen, unfortunately, our listeners won't be able to see this, but I'll try to read very quickly just some of the data. Why podcasting, right? And I've got some resources there at the bottom. But 3.2 million podcasters last year makes up, which is up from 1.2 in 2021. Wow. So I thought that was amazing. Approximately 62% of U.S. consumers listen to podcasts, which is well over the majority, obviously. And so when we started looking at this data, it was growing really fast. We started the podcast in 2019. And the hard thing was nobody really knew what a podcast was in our industry because there wasn't one yet. And so we had to teach people what a podcast was and how to utilize it. Video wasn't a thing with the podcast yet. Now you almost have to have it, right? And so this is why we thought might be the biggest piece because of the data. And so I kind of discovered, why did Stock Talk need to start? Because, well, selfishly, we wanted to learn from really, really important people. And let's get them on a microphone and we can record it. So it kind of took off from there.
So there are many different ways to do this, right? It's not just setting up a microphone and having 2 people talk like we're doing now. There are other aspects of podcasting that can work.
Yeah, definitely. So the avenue that we took was the avenue we took was the guest, right? We wanted to have a guest on that we could learn from every single week. You can also do a solo. You can do it by yourself, have a topic. But the thing is, if you want to start a podcast, you've got to be passionate about the topic, right? If you do that, the listeners will know. The viewers will know because they can see it. You've got to know what you're talking about and how you're talking about. Even if you don't know what you're talking about, get somebody on that might and learn from them. I mean, that's part of the whole podcasting industry. But why are you doing it, right? Are you doing it to make money? Are you doing it to grow your business, to talk about your business, or just to learn? And that's what Corey and I decided. We wanted to learn. We were young in the industry, so let's go for it. And so we decided to do that.
So what are some of the things that you worked on as far as the market evaluation? You mentioned that there was nothing like this in the stock world industry when you started. What other things did you look at to make sure it was going to work?
Yeah, this took a lot of time. After the exciting voicemail, we were like, okay, let's start tomorrow, right? Where do we get the microphones? But then we thought, okay, hold up. Let's do a market evaluation. We really didn't know what that was at the time. We were young and dumber and, thought we could get it going, and we did. But we thought, all right, let's look at other podcasts. Since the industry didn't have one, it was really hard to compare to what we needed to do and learn from it. So, you start looking at the biggest, best podcasts in the world, right? The Joe Rogans and all the just millions of listeners every single day. So we had to chop it down. All right, what can we handle? What can we learn? And since we were the first to the market, we were at an advantage because nobody else had anything to compare to, right? We didn't have anything to compare to, neither did they. But it also allowed us to understand that, we had to do it right the first time because of the comparison. And so it took a long time for us to educate the listeners about who we are, what we do, and what they might learn from it. So we were first to the market, but we had to learn from other podcast industries. And there's a lot of resources out there. We use Buzzsprout to get our podcasts out there. It's a platform that's very easy to use. Lots of videos on there that we learned from. And so it was just a research project, really.
How'd you figure out a format for what you were trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so like Corey and I both knew that we were going to be our co-host guest, right? We were going to have a guest on with us, and we were going to interview them and pick their brain because we were going to do that at the next show anyway. So let's let the world hear. And we did the exact same thing we're doing today. Is we hooked up the microphones. We gave the guests a set of questions so that they could prepare themselves and have a really good interview. And we wanted to make sure it was a good mixture, right? We want all those species intervened. It wasn't just pigs. It wasn't just cattle, which there are now podcasts where are very species specific that are wonderful. We wanted to be all included there. And so we decided that we were going to get a weekly guest in. And that allowed our listenership to grow. We were getting cattle people learning from goat people and goat people learning from pig people because one of the market evaluations that we studied was it needs to be specific, but there's cross-learning, right? So we wanted to make sure it was show livestock specific, but you could learn from other species. Even if you weren't just raising hogs or just raising cattle, there's a lot to learn in the industry at large. So we decided to do that interview, and there's others, that you could choose from, rather it be a storytelling or fact sharing or updated news. We just wanted to do that interview process.
What's the equipment look like for this type of deal, and is it expensive to get started?
It's really, there's a spectrum, right? If you wanted to go for it all, it could be expensive. Entry level is pretty good now. The technology is so advanced. And I'll give it for our ones in the room here and ones that might be listening. There's two different types of microphones, an XLR and a USB. This is getting a little detailed. You can do more research later. But the XLR has a little bit more control. The USB, you just plug and go. Both can work great. There's two different types of microphones, the dynamic microphone and a condenser microphone. One you set in the middle of the room and you can hear every single creak that happens in the room at all times. Isn't ideal for podcasting because you get a lot of different sounds. Then you have your condenser microphones that is used for voice, and it can have some noise canceling in the background in case there was an interruption. So that's the ones that we ended up using is the condenser microphones. That way we could pick up a little bit more of a voice than sounds.
We'll show our members of the audience here the equipment we use in just a bit. And I mean, it's amazing what you're able to do with Bluetooth, with hotkeys. It's really plug and play. You and I use the same equipment for our individual podcasts. But what else do you need to think about as far as software and things to actually edit the podcast once you get it recorded?
Yeah, so that's the equipment. Right now we need to figure out how to get it recorded and get it out there. And so there's two main ones, I guess, that are free. We're big on free. And so there's Audacity, which can be used in Windows, which works really well. It can also be used in Mac. GarageBand is a Mac-specific software. Again, totally free. That's what we used. A lot of YouTube videos of figuring out what wiggly line means what. And then I mentioned Buzzsprout is our subscription host site. It's by hour, so you load a number of hours on there per month, and then you're charged accordingly. And then for our remote, almost every single time we had a remote guest, right? So we wanted to make sure those are recorded. And so the next one there is the mixer, the Rodecaster Pro. You can actually plug right into that mixer and then record the audio from Zoom while you're while you're recording it yourself. So my co-host was in Indiana, I was in Ohio, and our guests could be anywhere in the world all at the same time. And if you didn't have the video component, you would not know that we're not in the same room. And that was our goal. Although the audio might sound differently, we wanted to make sure our audio was good because we're the host. And then we announced, like, hey, we've got on the phone so-and-so. And then the listener knew that it wasn't the same audio quality as what they might hear from us at remote.
I know one of the things that caught you by surprise, and one thing that I still struggle with is the time that it takes to do this in order to build your brand and be successful. But I think there's something to be said that there's a quality versus quantity thing with this as far as the guests and the topic matter you have on as well, but it can be time consuming.
Absolutely. And you know, when life happens, when we're both having kids and have really good full-time jobs and we're both raising livestock, right? Something has to give somewhere. We decided early that we were going to be a weekly podcast. That was a big bite to chew. We didn't know that once life happened, right? And so what you got to think about is you have your hour or hour and a half, 2 hours, however long you want that interview to go. But then you have an hour or two of editing. Then if you're really doing it right, you've got to put it out there on social media. You've got to promote little sound bits. That way people get interested. And then you got to schedule for next week's episode and get that guest online and make sure they've got the questions. This could be a full-time job very quickly, and it wasn't for us. And so it really becomes a cumbersome, it could be 6 hours per episode. And so you kind of have to align your time, whether you do 6 in a row and get you a nice bank build up, which is what I would recommend, or you can kind of do week after week.
And it doesn't have to be a 30-minute or a 1-hour podcast. It can be a 10-minute podcast, and the times can vary depending on the topic matter. If you run out of things to talk about, just kind of wrap it up, right? No matter if it's a 7-minute or a 37-minute interview. How do you prepare for the content, though? And I know you mentioned how you find the guests. You want them to be able to be experts in a certain topic matter, but then you have to do a little bit of preparation on your end.
Absolutely. So one of the things, when we did our market evaluation, we also built a business plan, as most should. With the business plan came a dream list, is what we called it. We had, I think, 80-some names on there from all species. Man, if we could get these people, it would be awesome. Unfortunately, we're not even halfway. Well, fortunately, I guess, we're not even halfway through that. So we knew some of them would be really hard to get. But we also knew that our listeners would love it. So we just threw it on paper, and then we went with the details of, okay, what's their number? How do we get a hold of these people? But we did end up getting folks like Temple Grandin, who are industry legends, and a lot of others that we thought there is no way. As a matter of fact, I got her number now. You know, so this whole thing kind of perpetuated itself. But
we can call her live on the podcast right now if we wanted to.
Yeah, right. So it took a lot of time, and then we wanted to make sure we rotated those species out, and it wasn't pig heavy this month and whatever. But we sometimes we knew more pig people than we did goat people, or vice versa. So there was a little bit of trickle down, but that took the most time, is getting those people. They're busy like everybody else, and so it could be 8 o'clock at night when they sit down and everybody else is in bed. Let's do this podcast, and so that took a lot of time. But we did have the dream list and still do.
A little short on time. I want to get to the monetization part of this though, because there is some revenue to be made if you do it right and build that brand.
Yeah, so this was a part that we never dreamed of. We were just two buddies talking to industry leaders every month. That was great. People sought us out to say, we want to be part of this. We don't know how podcasts work, but we want to be a part of it. That's my advice. Build your brand, do your market evaluation, get your business plan together, record some episodes, get it out there. Because now it's so popular that people are going to ask for your listenership. How many downloads do you have? How frequently do you do it? And then you can sell that, right? One thing that you cannot forget about, that this isn't a banner that you take down at the end of a show and put in a box. Every time you click play, which we posted many years ago, you can still go back and listen. Every time you click play, that business is going to be heard. Every time. And so we got to make sure that's valuable enough. We've also learned that the front third of a podcast is the most valuable, because people listen start to finish, and they might not finish it all. So those ads early are higher priced, more valuable. I did mention that we had our segments. We had topics from a hat. So we had a apparel company sponsor that. All of our hats that we use for topics from a hat come from XYZ, and make it fun. But people really like that. You know, they had something that was theirs, and we can interchange that if we needed to. So on top of that, we've had people pay us to go to their shows. On the bottom or the right side of the screen here, that was Denver, Colorado. A cattle producer paid for Corey and I to go out there and do a live podcast in their stalls. It was the coolest thing ever. We didn't have a table. We were holding our equipment and we were just talking about cattle. People loved it, and there was a crowd that surrounded. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is right here. That was the turning point of Stock Talk Podcast. That was our first live event. That was at the World Pork Expo, which is now the Exposition. And we talked to Dan Hogue, who was both our livestock judging coaches, an industry legend. There were 5 to 6 people in the audience. I think half of them were either our significant others or family. By the time we were done, that crowd showed up. And at that moment, we looked up and we were like, oh my gosh, people are listening to this thing that we're doing. And then it kind of took off from there. We did it in Louisville, and we've been in the Canadian Top Stock magazine. And so all I'm going to say is to leave you with this. If you're thinking about doing it, do your research and just jump and do it. We had no idea that we were going to talk to individuals like the Secretary of Agriculture in Oklahoma, like Temple Grandin, like the leaders we looked up to all of our life. It's easy. Find the resources, jump out, and get your podcast going if that's something that interests you.
Everybody in this room, everybody listening to this podcast has a story to tell about their role in agriculture. Whether you think you do or not. If you don't know how you stand out from the pack, ask somebody you know how you stand out from the pack. They'll tell you. Then you can build on that to either become available to media and the podcast to tell your story, or maybe do what Trevor did and start one yourself. Trevor Kirkpatrick is an organization director with Ohio Farm Bureau and also host of the Stock Talk podcast. And of course, we're here in Columbus at the American Farm Bureau target training. They brought it here to the capital city of Ohio with their promotion and education staff, and we're so happy they did. And I'm going to show you them one more time. It's for a great information on his podcast and how to be a part of your way. Trevor, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ty.
I'm Ty Higgins. We'll see you down the road.